Hi everyone, in today's quick tip tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take the raw footage from this drawing that I did for the next Swordplay page and take it into something a little more presentable. And this is a good example of how sometimes I get so wrapped up into rendering and drawing that I end up doing it too soon and I don't really check my proportions before I start rendering. And that's why their faces just seem a little off. I can just feel how they don't look exactly right. There's some good polish going on with the rendering, but overall it's a little wonky. So I'm going to not only show you how to fix and correct that issue, but also how to fit this page correctly, how to edit some of the values, and then finally how I write the story for Swordplay. So we'll go through all of that right now. So to start off, I'm going to fit it on the page. And all of the drawing paper that I use for Swordplay has these indication lines, and they let me know where the edge of the drawing will be. So I'm going to fit the left side line so I can't see them anymore. Right there. I'm specifically looking at this middle one. I'm going to hide it, and then I'm going to hold shift so I can move it perfectly straight up and down. I'm going to try to get rid of that upper line. I can see that I need to make the image a little bigger. Whoop, whoop, not that much bigger. Let's bring it back. All the while I'm holding shift so that it keeps its proportions intact. So you can see how now I'm eliminating that middle line on both the left and the right side. So you can see it there again. Then we're going to bring it, I might even go a little further. You know what, I'm going to take it even just a notch more just to get rid of that tangent on that petal up there. So with this one, I actually like having this up a little further just so there's more of the landscape on the bottom silhouetting here. So I'm going to continue holding shift and move it up, and I will deal with erasing this line down here first. So I'll click enter, it'll reshape it, and what I'm going to do for this healing brush, or you know what, no, first I'm going to make a copy of this layer so that we can see what it looks like in the end and we can do a compare and contrast. So what I'm going to do first is a patch tool. Now this is really useful if what you want to edit is like a background and it's a very easy texture or value to work with. So what we do is we're going to select the problem area, so in this case that little line on the bottom, and then you drag that spot anywhere around it that is similar and you let go. And you can see if I deselect with Control D and zoom in, you can see how that line is basically completely erased. So before and after. So it really is a magic tool. Sometimes you get some of this warping going on, but since we're going to be painting over a little bit anyways, I'm not too worried about that. The next thing I'm going to worry about are the values. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, and then Levels. What I do to almost every drawing that I scan in, I scan at a very high resolution, and sometimes that can pick up a lot of the paper texture and the paper value. So to eliminate that, I usually just change this to 250. If you take it anything more, you can see how it overexposes it. So you gotta be careful with how much you add. Even a little bit over will overexpose it. So I wanna be careful with that. So I'm gonna keep it at like 250. The middle slider bar will help making it a bit more contrasted, which I do want to do. I don't want to go crazy. And I'm not going to really touch this much at all. Actually, I kind of like how that looks. Oftentimes this makes it appear too dark, but I think for this drawing it helps. And they say usually you want your values on like a perfect bell curve. So mine, you can tell, since we have so much negative space, has this really crazy slope here. And normally that's not typical. You usually want your slope to be in the middle with more middle range values, but this is kind of an exception since we're working with a lot of white where the words will go. And if you ever feel like there's too much dark in your drawing, and if this is specifically for print, I always change my output level. So if I know that it's going to print dark, I just edit this, slide it, and that way none of those values will get printed too dark. Now it's something you still want to test. You don't want to just blindly trust it. So I still recommend doing your test prints, but this has helped me a lot, at least with mine. So I'm going to keep it about there. Choose OK. And to see the difference, we'll Control Z back and forth. You can see how already there's kind of a pop to the values. Now I'm going to make another copy of that. So that was our values. And now we're going to get into the liquefy filter. So this is where we're going to take some of this awkwardness in the proportioning and do our best to fix it. And oftentimes I don't fully fix it on my first try. And especially with the recording, I'm sure, well, hopefully I can get it in just a couple, but I never want to just rely on my first pass. I try to do a few just so I know that I'm giving it more than just one pass. This is a really strong pressure. I'm going to change that to be a bit lower. Okay, that's a bit better. So right away I can tell Red's head, her ear is very far away and the back of her head needs to be a bit smaller. Now as much as I love the liquefy tool, I gotta be careful because I used to be in this bad habit where I would over liquefy my drawings, and when you do that it can tend to make your drawings look blurry. And especially with traditional pencil stuff, you really gotta be careful because the paper texture can often be unforgiving if you keep pushing and pulling it like we are with the liquefy filter. So something to be leery of. And as much as I love it, I'm also trying my best, especially with my traditional stuff, not to overuse it or if using it at all, honestly. This is one of the first Swordplay comic pages that I really felt I needed the liquefy because of how unfinished and how or not so much unfinished, but how disproportionate things looked. And that was an error on my end, moving too quickly in wanting to get to the rendering stage. But this is a good reminder to all of you guys to, you know, build your solid foundations first, and then you can have fun with the rendering on top. Because otherwise you're in this position where everything just looks a little off. Okay, let's see how that looks and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so before and after. You can see how Red's face still looks a bit bizarre, but my next trick that I'm going to show you is, oh, you know what, actually? I kind of like the first pass on Christina. Maybe not. Okay. The first trick I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the image. So I have that as a keyboard shortcut, but for you guys, I'm going to go to Image Rotation, Flip Canvas Horizontal. And oftentimes, if you ever feel like you have something that looks a bit disproportionate or just feels off, try flipping the canvas. And then we can go back to our liquefy filter. And I can already tell Christina's face looks a little crazy. And this is another good example of how traditional can be a bit more difficult because with digital you can flip on the fly. So if you're working primarily in Photoshop, this is something that I think you should be using often. And honestly, it's something that I wish I could do more with traditional. And if you are a traditional artist, there are little tricks you can do, like taking a photo on your phone or iPad or whatever it may be, and then flipping it on there just to see. That's something I've been doing with my iPad more, and I need to get into the habit of doing that more. Oops. We're gonna go back to our liquefy. Okay, so Christina's head, she looks like she's had a cocktail or two. We're gonna close and reform the eye. I feel like these are the times I will be most quiet because I'm trying to concentrate to make sure it looks and feels right. Same with the red. I'm going to lower her gaze here. And I also have a bad habit of when liquefying, I make features of the face either too big or too small. So I'm trying to be acutely aware of that as I'm recording this live as well. And I kind of like the fullness of the hair before I did my first liquefy pass, so I'm bringing some of that back. But like I said, I'm not pushing or pulling too hard, or else we may get caught in that zone where it's blurring out. And that's something I want to avoid at all costs. All right, let me look back from it. Sometimes I need to physically move myself back, because if you get too close to your drawing, sometimes you can't see the whole picture. All right, let's see what that looks like before and after. Oh, that's much better. Okay, and then I'm going to flip it back to the original stance. And I also have that on a keyboard shortcut, something I would recommend doing for yourself. Then do one more pass on red. I'm going to zoom in though. Ooh, yeah, that back eye looks a little wonk. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Okay, that feels a lot better to me. And then Christina feels better as well. Okay. I'm going to choose OK. And now if I hide the layer under it, so we go from the new one to the original. Oops. I'm going to flip this one as well. Okay, Christina feels way better to me. Red still feels a little funky. So one more time, we're going to go in here. And like I said, sometimes it will take a few times. And I try to get it done on as little passes as possible. But sometimes these things have a mind of their own. Okay, that feels way better to me. So now, oh, I seem to have moved it a bit. Let me recenter it. There we go. So what I do with a lot of my Swordplay pages is I do some digital effects and editing, but I try to keep it as minimum as possible because I like the traditional feel and I want the book to feel traditional. So I'm going to do some editing, and basically what I'm going to be doing is adding some light tones where I want some lighter areas to pop, and kind of adding a few gradients just to give it some more contrast. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this the light layer. So anywhere where I want to add a lighter value, I'm going to do it on this layer. And I'm going to do it with a brush that is my skin brush. This is one that I created with CG Cookie back in the day. And the reason I like it is because it has a bit of texture to it. You can see as I lay it out here, it has kind of a graininess to the edge. So let me go in. And basically, I'm just going to punch some of these lighter values throughout. And you know what? I might time-lapse this just so you don't have to sit there and watch me do all these small edits everywhere. Okay, so now with red all finished there, and I kind of like that extra gradient coming up from her shirt to add contrast to the arm. You can see how before they were just blending in a bit too much. So adding just that little touch of a lighter value Adds a nice contrast. So now I'm going to pretty much do the same thing for Christina. So once again, I'm going to time lapse this part too. All right, so now I'm going to edit the background a touch before I add my multiply layer. So I'm going to do gradients next. Now, sometimes this could mean the actual gradient tool I'll use, but in this case, I'm going to first just use my paintbrush, or my brush tool, I should say, and kind of paint in, or in this case, over the lighter values, just to make them pop more, especially with this silhouette on the bottom. Make sure I get these strings that are hanging off of Red's box, and also the strings that are hanging off of Christina. Like that. So now the main background area that I want to tackle are kind of the inconsistencies with this gray tone in the back. Oh, you know what though? I'm gonna not make this the gradient. I'm gonna make this the light edits. Because I'm gonna do some of this back tone editing with a multiply layer. And this I'm gonna call, instead of shadows, I'm gonna call it darker values. So I'm gonna eyedropper tool with Alt, this mid-tone gray, and I'm just gonna lightly press it everywhere, everywhere that's around them. Create more of a kind of neutral base. Because I don't want to distract too much, because the attention should still be on them. If I do this right, it should be a pretty even tone. So I know in a second here, grab my eraser tool and I'll edit the areas that I think I went a little overboard. Let's see how that looks. So it's a bit dark, and what I can do to fix that is just lower the opacity. Much better. Now I'm going to do that one more time, but instead of editing the background, I'm going to focus more on the values on the actual characters. So let me once again grab a mid-tone or darker gray, and I'll just lightly brush some of these darker values. And it may not seem like a lot while you're going through, but if I turn this layer on and off, you can see how we're really starting to push values, even by these simple touches. It can really add contrast and divert attention quickly. So I don't want to add too much where it becomes a distraction. I just want to add enough where it makes the values pop and it puts the attention where I want it. And in this case with Red and Christina, I want it to be in between their eyes. I want you to be going back and forth between Red and Christina, and you can just tell they're having a conversation where they're both enjoying it. And that mood, that feeling is what we're trying to create here. I'm not going to add too much to the face, as I feel like I already added quite a lot with the graphite. And usually my signature is having really dark hands, but I'm going to not over darken them here. I kind of like them being lighter because then it's pressed against this dark wood pattern underneath, and that's where I'm going to darken it. I don't want to do too much because I'm also trying to have that transition into the clouds. But for this canteen here, I can push this a bit darker. Bring back my eraser tool. And I like that gradient that we had, so I'm just going to essentially just accent it. Make it pop a little more. And you can see how red definitely is starting to stand out in certain areas. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. And I'm going to do the same for Christina. Now, Christina has a lot of these nice dark values to begin with. So if anything, I'm just punching them to make them even more satisfying of a contrast when you lead from this dark hair area to her lighter locks up here. And I can tell already that I've pushed too hard down here, so I'll just take the eraser, undo just a touch, and then go back at it. And the reason this is so nice to do traditional and digital for this book is I feel like I can get my love of drawing with traditional medium and combine it with the editing knowledge that I have from doing Photoshop tutorials for so many years. So I'm able to combine both of my loves in one project. And with her face, I'm the same thing with red. I'm not going to touch it too much. I like her values being a little softer against red's, who has a bit more texture, a bit more roughness to it. Where the perception with Christina is definitely more clean, kind of pristine. And that's the look that I'm trying to create with her. Oh, come on, Photoshop. Bear with me right now. Okay, I had to refresh it there. Photoshop was playing a trick on me. So I'm going to continue going through. And you can see when I have black selected as my color, it gets way too dark, way too fast. So instead, I like working with a medium gray when I'm doing my multiply layer. That way I can lightly press and kind of slowly build up and add to those values that I already have laid out in front of us. All right, for the wood texture down here, I'm just going to give a light pass throughout. I'm not going to edit it too much. I want it to read as that graininess that I had with the pencil texture. Maybe I'll add some more contrast to the clouds over here. Okay, I'm not going to over edit a lot of this background area because I need to write in my words, which is usually the last thing I'll do before finishing this off. Let me see how that looks. Whoop. See one very dark area over here. There we go. So now if I put all these layers in a folder, so all I do is you click the top layer, hold shift, click all the layers in between that you want, or just click the top and bottom one and it'll auto select the ones in between. Click the folder icon and it will group them all together. And you can see the difference that that will make. Now if I hide these layers and just show you the original, you can see how before and after. There are small changes, but in my opinion, they make a big impact when looking at the final product. So now the words, and this is something that I'm still going back and forth between in my head. I want to handwrite the entire book, but there are definitely times where I notice it is strenuous, and I know how much easier it would be if I created my own font. But at least for this page, I'm going to continue writing it by myself. So I have lines that I put on every page in Swordplay, and that way the lines are consistent from one page to the next. So you're not feeling like one is way to the side or it's kind of lost in space. I try to have it to be a little controlled while still having variation enough to move within the page itself. So I already have the words that I need to write. And these need to be flipped though. And I sort of aligned them before I started doing the tutorial. So I want this one down here, and I may even bring some of the words up. We'll see how that one goes down there. And up here, I definitely don't want the single word hanging on the end. So, oh, that's right. Hold on, let me change this font. We're gonna do this one. There we go. I don't mind too much what font it is. I just need to make sure that it is similar in the size that I write at. Okay, that one's pretty good. So what I need to do now is make this either a bit bigger so that that last part doesn't hang by itself, or I make it smaller so that more words fit down here, and that way it'll just feel better. And right now it's not centered either. And a quick way to do that is select the layer, choose Control A, which will select everything on that layer. Go to Layer on the top menu, Align Layer Selection, and we're going to do horizontal centers. So now that writing is completely in the center. For the bottom, it's a little different because we aren't working completely in the center like we are up here. But I will change this to be the same as the one up there. Like that. Now, what I may do, I can kind of tell the letters are overlapping some of the background texture. I may erase some of that background so that the words aren't fighting the background image. Now I'll see when I get there. I may even add some more clouds here because there's a lot of just negative space and I feel like it doesn't have a purpose. So I'll see when we get there, but for now, I'm going to begin writing this, and I have an old folder with the last page's words on it. And I kind of use it for reference, for size, for cleanliness. And I'm going to do the same with this, but to write it, I move the layer down one line. I lower the opacity, and I do the same with these words. I zoom in pretty close because I'm working on a Cintiq, so I want to make sure I can write it legibly. I use a chalk brush and make it very small. So I try to line it up with the width of my old writing. And I'm pretty sure I use 9 as my size because 9 is my favorite number. There's 9 characters in Swordplay. 9's kind of a number that's represented everywhere. So it was easy for me to remember that I used 9. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and time lapse this so you aren't just sitting here watching me handwrite this entire thing. So here we go. So at this point, I can kind of see that some of the lines look pretty symmetrical and centered, but other ones do not. So what I'm going to do is, since I know all the words are completely centered, I can use that to align my writing that is not. And then same with the one above it. Sometimes it can be tricky going around all these letters. One side. There we go. Then I'll move it to about there. Okay, now let me zoom out completely. Alright, not bad. I do think Christina, her head is like almost getting in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all of it down just a touch so that there's some breathing room in between the writing up here and Christina's head. Yeah, that feels better to me. Okay, and I'm going to do the same for the bottom. Although I'm going to first try starting up here and working it down. I might go at an angle. But since this is kind of experimental, I don't know if this is going to work. So bear with me. I'm going to time lapse this again. And if I don't like it, we can always just move it around. Top words. Then I'll create a new layer for the bottom words. Alright, here we go. Alright, so when I look at it, I actually kind of like it. I would just say the line here feels a bit pushed over. That is a very quick fix. Same thing we were doing up there, just moving it over. And bam. Now I feel better about the lines that they are creating. If anything, I might even move it over. Let me see it from further away. Sometimes it's easy to judge it from close up, but when you look far away, you're like, ooh, that looks kind of rough. Okay, I like that. Take out the lines. And the one thing I do with my words that I add in Swordplay is I change the opacity to just be 50%. And you know what? Let me double check that before I... Yes. No, it is 50%. That's because when it's at 100, it just feels very dark And even here, it doesn't look too bad, but I feel like it takes away a little bit from the drawing. If you go any lighter than 50, it almost becomes hard to read. So I'm going to keep it somewhere in the middle. And you know what? I might even go back and change it to just be 60, because I feel like just that little extra bit of value helps into helping read better. And that's how you take it from the original drawing into the final cut. So I hope this was helpful for you guys, and thanks for watching.